79% of you this year are planning to make a New Year's resolution around improving your physical or mental health in order to feel more alive, in order to operate at peak performance, or just to not feel like shit anymore. But the hard reality is that most of us fail on this mission year after year. And why? Because we fail to keep promises to ourselves, we fail to break away from self-sabotaging patterns, and because we are not working on the root cause of the problem, which is our inner selves. So I went through every conversation that we had this year around mental clarity, subconscious reprogramming, trauma healing, even inner child work, and I pulled the most impactful and the most transformative moments for you to help you this year. If you are listening to these conversations, 2025 may be the year when you are going to be finally able to break away from your old patterns, step into your true potential, not just in the area of health, but maybe in all other areas of your life. So make sure to take some notes.
There's many types of wounding and emotional trauma that we can pick up in life. Obviously, some by our own doing and some by the circumstance and how we were raised and grew up. I would answer this telling you a simple analogy and story about a lake. So imagine, because I'd like to tell you an experience, and for the listeners to experience this in the form of conscious and subconscious, because there are some conscious decisions that we make that create the trauma for us, but also subconscious ones, and that's where usually the traumatic and wounding events stay with us. So when I spoke about emotional bandwidth, a lot of that trauma that's stored and takes that real estate, it lives in our subconscious. It is said that 85 to 90% of our decisions are driven by our subconscious. And that's where the wounding and the emotional trauma stays in subconscious and drives the 10% of our conscious decisions. So coming back to the concept of lake of emotions and conscious and subconscious, imagine seeing this beautiful, serene lake with all the green nature around it. Everything above the water, I would regard as consciousness, and everything below the water, I would regard as unconscious. And when we get traumatized in our childhood, and our formative years between 0 and 7 are one of the most important ones, but also we can pick up trauma at any stage afterwards as well. There's a secondary stage where we can pick up trauma, which is between the ages of 7 and 12 or 15, depending if you're a woman or a man, as I mentioned, the 3-year gap. And what happens is the ages between 0 and 7, they are the most formative years for the subconscious brain. Everything that is programmed into our psyche tends to stay for a very, very long time or forever in our psyche. Whereas the traumas that are being picked up later, they're actually easier to release. They are less ingrained. They're not as deep. So coming back to the concept of the emotional lake, I would say imagine we have the bottom of the lake. And on the bottom of the lake, if the lake is clear and there's no trauma in your life, you would see a beautiful ecosystem, vegetation, flourishing, everything is growing. And that's how it starts for us. As little toddlers, we grasp everything and it starts growing in this beautiful, and the subconscious starts being taught, yeah, this is your mom, this is your dad, it's safe. And what starts to happen is the little traumas that we experience would take form of either pebbles, big stones, or sand. But the reality of it is, under the pebbles, on the floor of the lake, nothing can grow. Under the sand, which is small, tiny, repeated traumas that we can pick up as well, nothing can grow. Same with big rocks that are thrown into the lake and stay at the bottom of the lake, nothing can grow. So the types, these three types, I would say the pebbles are smaller situations where we as a child are told or shown by our family or friends of family or our grandparents or anyone who is a caregiver in those formative years. They are showing you these smaller situations where you're told, this is bad, this is good, but then when you want attention, let's say from a caregiver, you're withdrawn that attention. And if that attention and that love, and if it's withdrawn for too long, it creates a big trauma, which would be a rock. But if it's a small withdrawals of attention, it creates pebbles, and it creates confusion for the child. So these pebbles then start creating, like maybe this size, they start living rent free on the bottom of the lake, not allowing that child then to create and foster nourishment for their own psyche, but also not to be able to grow in those areas. So, also, it's a finite amount that we have. So, if there's a finite amount and 30% or 40% of the real estate of the bottom of the subconscious lake is taken by the sand, pebbles, and big traumas, then it's only for 50% or less for the other parts of your own learning, of positive reinforcements, of positive view on life left for you, for your subconscious. And I think the balance between these two determines how the person perceives later in their life as a teenager and as an adult, how they perceive world. Because if there's more than 50% of that real estate on the bottom of the lake taken by this trauma, their view will be mostly negative. Whereas if it's less, it will be mostly positive. Even if it's 55 to 45, it will already have a big impact. So coming back to the types of trauma, the rocks, the big rocks, are the ones that have a very deep, like they would be very deep wounds. For example, being never accepted or giving love from your father or mother. Being told or shown that your needs as a child do not matter, because that translates to a young child as feeling that I do not belong here on earth. It shows the child that there's no reason for me to be here, and that's why later on in life, where adults grow from this type of childhood, and we're not even talking about abuse yet, they tend to have these thoughts about, do I really matter? Does my existence bring anything to this earth? Does it bring anything to my family? And their worldview is shaped based on being told that they're not lovable, that they do not deserve to be loved. And that unfortunately creates a lot of different dynamics that will play out in a lot of traumatic ways later in life. Where it comes to sand, sand is created as multiples, and I mean hundreds of very tiny, tiny little nuances that happen in interactions between obviously close family, but then friends. When you go to a kindergarten, and then all of a sudden, three of your friends in the kindergarten, when you're 3 or 4 or 5, show you these disdain, maybe don't like you, but it's a repeated, small, traumatic events that happen in formative years. And what tends to happen is then, because it takes more and more real estate in the emotional and subconscious lake, it creates this thought, oh, other people tell me as well and show me by this little gestures that I also am not worthy. And then that creates very low self-esteem. It creates times for people where they don't love themselves to the point where it might end up with scarring themselves, might end up with addiction, might end up with them needing to soothe that pain that comes so deeply from within. On the other hand, when we have a child who is maybe free from big traumatic events in their life, because that can also, and it's beautiful that it happens, but they have the pebbles and the sand in their emotional lake, it is slightly easier for them to look at the world, have a little bit more positive view of the world. And what tends to happen is they live life with this positive outlook. And when they do that, they do have that positive outlook on life. It is very easy to pick up a pebble 100 times rather than pick up a massive rock one time. It is much less effort. Same with sand. So then later on in life, when they learn emotional resilience tools that can help them to move these, they tend to have much better results with accessing their emotions, and they have much better results by working with these tools to remove this trauma. Where it comes to big stones, it is much harder, and unfortunately it takes a lot of resilience and preparation to be able to hold space for yourself, to the point where a lot of time people say, I don't want to relive my trauma, I don't want to be re-traumatized, because when they do that, it simply comes from self-preservation. They don't want to be destroyed again. They don't want to feel so unworthy again. And I strongly believe, and we're going a little bit sideways from this question, but I think it's important to note that you don't need to re-traumatize yourself to be able to heal your wounding. All you need to do is slowly create emotional resilience to be able to pick up smaller pieces from that big rock and move it away. Move it away. You don't have to lift the whole rock at once. But sometimes it's so overwhelming that people think it is so big that I'd rather live with the pain of my existence right now than pick up that massive rock, revisit that traumatic event, because it's so overwhelming.
As long as I was busy feeling the other people, I did not have to feel myself. And I think that's a huge aha moment maybe for people who know, hey, I think like I do this people pleasing thing, that I always look that others are happy. Sit with it and really be honest. What would happen if you don't spend all this time anymore tuning into the man or the woman, what they need? You would suddenly have time to feel yourself. And that's what we're scared of. Because if we develop through either a helicopter, it's just an example, there's so many different ways, or the message of like when you got punished because you were in your power. And both ways you can get the message, it's not safe to be me. What happens is I split parts off of myself and I don't know how to feel myself. I can actually develop fear of feeling myself. I had no idea how to, deal with all my emotions. So it's literally, you feel like you're scared of your own emotions. I see that with my path and also clients in my one-on-ones. It's like, there are no monsters in us, but if we never had a safe space where somebody helped us to move through it, we're scared of ourselves. So it's actually a protection mechanism to be constantly focused on somebody else. And that is an interesting pill to swallow and be like, oh God. And a very important thing to understand that no matter when you talk about relationships, when you have addictions, codependencies, people pleasing, there's always a secondary gain for part in you. And even if you feel like a victim to certain patterns, you're not. You can break it. You just need to understand that this happens out of conditioning from family systems. And it still has a protection mechanism for your subconscious mind, for parts in you that believe this is the only way you can relate in a safe way.
You said something very interesting, that people are so focused on pleasing the other person that they avoid feeling themselves. Is this also how someone can lose themselves, their true selves, in a relationship?
100%.
How does that happen?
So I love that you ask that, because that's also a common topic that I see with the people in my life. And I know it too, because when you talk about codependency, what for me is a good example of losing yourself in relationships. So what did you learn about love? Did you feel like the moment you're in a relationship with somebody, it's just about them? Look back at your childhood. Did you have space, or did you feel like you had to constantly please your mom or your dad? Or did you feel like you didn't want to take up space, right? Did you ever had the experience it was okay for you to have emotions for your own needs? If you did not develop that when you were little, meaning, let's go to the extent of you had no space to create your own sense of self. And that can happen a lot. So when you are in a dynamic in the family where you did not have a space to understand, who am I in this relationship? Yeah? Then how do you know who you are when you are in a relationship later on with an adult? It's still your inner child has no clue who he is. And as an adult, suddenly you have a clue. You don't have a clue. We lose ourselves, how I see it, in relationships when we enter relationships, first of all, from the place of maybe you're in love, but definitely they're going to be a part in you. Again, it's my experience, take it or leave it, right? But I feel like the moment we lose ourselves is because part of us searches something in the other we don't have in ourselves, we are not connected to. Then, and then there is this feeling of, I have to sacrifice something to be loved. And maybe it's when I'm in a relationship, my freedom with my friends. Maybe it's my sexuality. Maybe it's earning my own money. And actually that are very genetic beliefs, that is very genetically to always sacrifice something. And I think it's for men and women, this idea. And in order to not lose ourselves, we need first a strong sense of self for us. Like before I go in any friendship or romantic partnership, in order to not lose myself, I need to know who I am, what my values are, what my boundaries are, what I'm looking for. I don't believe we completely have to have it all figured out. I don't believe you have to freaking love yourself from day till morning. But I believe, from my experience, you need to have a certain foundation. Because I, in my past, have been codependent in friendship and romantic. I was either the lonely wolf, so not keeping up connections at all with people. The moment I left the city, I had no friendships anymore. So that was a lot of loneliness. Or if I was in a relationship, there was codependency developed, even if I didn't want it. Or my friendships were just with one person and was codependent. You're my rock, I'm your rock. You're my family, I'm your family. And it came out of this need of just having a safe space, because I did not have a safe space within me.
Is that the root of codependency? Or what would be the root of codependency?
So codependency literally means, on a subconscious level, you're like, I need you to do this so I feel safe, and you do this for me so I feel safe or loved, right? You make like two people who don't feel completely safe and complete on their own. They just come together and be like, I need you to feel safe, you need me. And actually it's almost like there could be a belief of, I'm only loved when I'm needed. And that is also an interesting thing. So if you grow up in a family where, again, you felt somehow not approved of who you are, because maybe you have been different, maybe you were more sensitive, maybe you were more an artist and nobody around you was like that, or you wanted to see the world. So then as kids, we have two needs, belonging and being our true self. But when we're little, belonging is stronger because we're freaking depending. We have a dependency on our parents to survive. So we find coping mechanisms. So maybe we're like, but if I'm the peacemaker, if I'm the one always helping in the household, if I'm doing this, suddenly I get love and I get acceptance. But if I'm creating in my room, I get this, can you not just be quieter? Why do you have to do this crazy thing again? That is rejection. That doesn't feel safe. But then you're cleaning and doing things. Oh, I'm so happy you did this for me. So you get through the feedback of your parents and understanding when it is safe to be me and when do I get love. And having this feeling of only when I'm needed, I am loved is a pattern. So you attract, when you have that codependency within you, you literally look at the word dependency. Codependency is an addiction. I'm addicted to the other person. I need somebody to fulfill that space, right? It can go that way. I need that in a way, and they need me. So we feel safe together, because alone, I don't really feel safe. And so you attract people who have the same, so you mesh with each other, right? So another person who's like, yeah, I love to adapt. Let's just create our little bubble. But two people will lose themselves, because what my experience is that it comes down to you did not learn when you were little that it's safe to be authentically you, to have your own boundaries and your virtues, maybe be different than your parents and be accepted in that, and being loved for who you are instead of your achievement or how you're helping, or right. So that can definitely influence how you choose a partner. So if you come from this, I'm only loved if I'm needed, because you literally don't feel in yourself that you're lovable without this. And there would come, as a woman, a guy who's like, I don't need anything from you. I choose you for you. The system could go like, what? No. Because there's still part in you that is scared to meet yourself. It's like, no, why don't you need me? Like, what's happening? No, he will leave me. If he doesn't, that's another thing. If he will not need me, he will leave me. The codependency is because we need each other, we're going to stay with each other. Nobody will leave. Do you know what I mean? We both need each other, so nobody will leave. But if two healthy, whole humans come together, it's like, I know I don't need you, but I choose you. And that is, for me, such a different energy. Same with friendships. I don't need you, but I choose you because you enrich my life, because I know I would love to grow with you. That comes from a very, very different background. It's from a choice and not from a lack that wants to be fulfilled. And yeah, does that make sense?
Oh, totally.
Okay.
And when you say that, it also it gets me thinking when somebody says that I need you. It immediately creates that kind of expectation, and you put that expectation that the person that, like, they need to do something so I can feel whole, and vice versa, and I can feel that that person is putting that kind of expectation on me, that I need to do something to make her feel whole, right? And every single time when you set expectations, you are pretty much setting up yourself for disappointment, especially when you are not a full cup yourself. So it raises the question, how can we remain our full selves?
While in relationship?
While in relationships, or just in life in general.
So for me, that goes back to being aware of yourself, to really know yourself, know thyself, right? This beautiful phrase, know thyself. So look at the word relationship. It's a ship where you're together. If you have no clue what's going on in your own ship, how can you steer with somebody together a new ship? So in order to keep who you are, you need to first get to know yourself and be okay with being alone, I would say. So the journey is very different. Let me say, I come from more the background of, so attachment style is a huge thing. And I don't want to go into that one because it's a huge field, but I got into that actually for my own healing, understand a bit more so how to help my clients. So I'm at the beginning of this. But what I can say is, when you come from anxious attachment, that would be in codependency, this clinging. While in avoidant, we both have the same needs, but avoidant and anxious both are afraid of intimacy, right? And we all are afraid of intimacy when we feel not safe to be ourselves. Why? Because intimacy means into me see. I love this. Into me see. Intimacy, into me see. So if I have all these different walls around me, and I'm afraid of looking at myself, I need first to sit with myself and stop being afraid of myself. Because if I can have intimacy with myself, how can I let somebody else in? It's not possible. We only can allow somebody in as much as I let myself in. So, of course, I believe we heal in relationships. I had the most amazing healing through a women's circle, through sitting with women holding me, or a brother, like a soul brother holding me in a presence that I never had. And I know they can open up certain aspects of me if I'm ready. At the same time, if I would, let's talk romantic sense. If somebody sits in front of me and is wholeheartedly ready to just be like, let's go into the light, the shadows, whatever, but I'm afraid of my anger and my shame, there will be a lot of fighting from my system to let that person in. So we can only get to be loved and seen to the depth we allow ourselves to see and love ourselves. So in order to not lose ourselves, we have to get to know ourselves. And coming from the patterns you develop when you're a child, it depends what you need. For example, what I mean with this is when you come from more this anxious, of like afraid, maybe there are people, I see the patterns, either the lonely wolf or people constantly jump from relationship to relationship. And then you have the avoidant who is like, I don't have needs, right? They may be really good at being alone. Like the people who I know who said they were healing from avoidant attachment, who are like, I'm run away before you catch me. They're good with being alone. So I can best talk about if you're not good with being alone. Then I would say, learn to be that. Find ways how you can self-soothe, how you know you're complete on your own, that you don't need to be needed by somebody else, that you don't need that certain attention to feel good, to feel valued. If you know that this is your weak spot, find ways to strengthen the relationship with yourself.
One of the lessons is everyone is a 7-year-old child, including yourself.
Okay.
So I learned this throughout a business project I was working on, and I was having a very difficult time managing expectations. Everybody was already on the edge of explosion, and everybody was just acting out, right? So I had to assess the situation, why people behave the way they behave, and I had to come in and I had to fix everything. I was an external person who came into this project, and I had to extinguish the fire. And Charlotte gave me this advice: look at the client as they are a 7-year-old, because the way they are acting is as their 7-year-old self. They are afraid of something. They are worried about something. They are dealing with their traumas. They feel that they are not good enough. So that perfectly explained the perfectionism that they had. That perfectly explained why they were abandoning the big projects in the project, and they were focusing on the small things, right? Because they wanted to show that they are worthy of attention, or they just want to prove it to someone, and maybe themselves or their parents, that they are good enough. They were acting out of fear because something happened to them in the past, and they were just projecting the past in the present moment. And in reality, there's nothing wrong with the present moment.
Yeah.
But their subconscious were seeing similarities, so they knew, they picked up on those signs, and they started to feel the same feelings, and then after they just started to act on it. And the moment I started to apply this strategy, that I just speak to them as they were 7-year-old, I'm just gonna say a name, 7-year-old James, whenever he was acting out or shouting at people, I was literally talking to him as he was a 7-year-old. I'm not going to shout at him. I'm not going to, destroy his confidence. I'm going to give him validation that probably the way you feel is valid. Let's talk about it. Why do you feel about that the way you feel? And what are the things that we can do about it? So that's how I was able to de-escalate the entire situation in a matter of weeks. And then we were finally able to get to work. So that was just one example at work, but in personal life is also very similar.
But I think that also gives you a level of empathy to understand that not everyone is reacting the way they do, or acting the way they do just because they're mean or because they are a bad person or something. It helps you understand them okay, their 7-year-old child is just taking over, taking the lead on this kind of situation. How did this help you feeling more empathetic or feeling more connected or whatever in your projects or in your personal life? How would you say this
This
lesson?
learning.
Yeah, and especially now that you know this learning, that you have it straight in your head.
Yeah,
How does
so,
it help you in everyday life?
That's actually going to be another lesson that I had from this year, which was that everything is a mirror to you.
Yeah.
So it also really helped me to understand that what I see in these people, that they act out of fear or from their 7-year-old version of themselves, I do the exact same thing. So whenever something happens to me and I start to feel triggered or I start to feel neglected or I'm afraid, and then like, okay, so it helps me to take a step back and reflect on the moment, like what is actually triggering for me in this situation. And it allows me to learn more about myself, identify the points that I need to work on because it's there for a reason. So the lesson is that everything is a mirror. So you know what was happening in the past couple of weeks here.
Yes.
The way I try to walk away from that is that there were moments when I felt really mad and disappointed and hurt and not appreciated. I felt injustice, all of that.
Understandable. Yeah.
Yeah, but you choose how you react to that. So I reacted more severely is because there is still a part of me that I haven't properly dealt with, or I haven't properly healed. So once I'm able to take note of that and then reflect on that and seek out for help or for trying to find a solution that's going to help me to address those problems that I have, that's how you can actually heal from that, and you can just have like a way easier and smoother life without being triggered all the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And probably that also helps you like to let go. Instead of like staying there and fight their war, just choose peace and let go of it.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you have limited amount of energy. So you can choose where you channel that energy. Are you going to channel that energy to feel better about yourself, feel better about the situation, or are you going to channel that energy towards fixing the solution, fixing the problem?
Yes.
Are you going to channel that energy towards a more like higher purpose that you are working towards? And that was my conclusion there, that I think I'm right. I feel triggered. I feel disappointed, but I'm already spending way too much time and energy and mental real estate on this problem, which is completely distracting me from where I would like to go. So at some point, I just draw the line. That's it, no more. Today is the day when I'm just going to stop thinking about it, and then I'm going to make decisions so I can just focus on what is more in alignment with my long-term goals. I came across this from Chris Williamson. He was saying that male depression gets treated like female depression. Men are made feel loved and accepted when all they want to do is feel capable and powerful and to be competent, respected, and admired. You give these things to a man, he will deal with suffering until the end of this earth. What was your strategy like to get through that period of life?
I think that what you just read was spot on. I didn't know. I didn't have a strategy back then. Now I know what I need to do if it happens. Again, how to overcome. But back then I had no idea. I was feeling quite lost. In this period of my life, I literally just moved out from home, been to a different country. I have lost my father 6 months ago. I haven't dealt with grief in this whole time. I was just numbing myself and distracting myself with substances, too much work, not sitting down and actually see what happened. So when I move out 6 months later, and I spent some time isolating, nothing to numb my brain, then all the thoughts and all the feelings just came in place, and it hit me like a massive bomb inside me. Like everything just exploded. And what I did to deal with it was I seek help. I visit a therapist in the campus. I seek a mentor as an extra help to help me with self-development, to make me feel empowered, because, the therapists, you just have these conversations that can help you to a certain level. But what helped me a lot was trying to empower myself, to feel, to navigate through the purpose again. I started gym. Gym literally, I think, was one of the main And that's why I also like in my work to combine fitness with mental health, because for me, gym helped me through this time. If it wasn't there to give me again another purpose, to gain the feedback, to regain some confidence, to have something to work on a lot in life, I don't know what would happen, you know. I was also studying something I was really passionate about and I wanted to get better. So I think everything that you read, I wasn't realizing back then, but that was the steps that helped me go through it slowly. It took like whole 6 months to overcome it to a certain level. And then probably I developed some kind of trauma, because then for the next about 2.5 years, maybe 3, I wasn't able to access much of emotions, which being an actor, that was a problem as well back then, because I couldn't access my emotions to put them out. I was so afraid of the emotions. So when my practice as in the theater was to sow emotions and feel them to act, that was my biggest challenge back then. And only the last year of my training I managed to release. So theater, the practices I've learned there, they actually helped me so much learning about myself, so much breaking those walls about emotions, changing my view about human behavior and psychology. Like, people don't understand because it's not something that you think about what acting is about and theater is about. But it was so much depth on the human psychology and philosophy through that changed completely my perspective and helped me in one of the most challenging periods of my life. But the early steps was that just wanted to feel more empowered, educate myself as much as I could, trying to understand myself and find myself through that period, and gym. Working out almost every day.
Probably, like, if I can speak from my experience, I think this is also something that not just me, but many people out there also struggle with, is that little voice in your head when you speak to yourself.
Yeah.
So self-talk was something very difficult for me to navigate, and just to speak to myself in a more compassionate way whenever something happens. Mm-hmm. So for me, self-talk was definitely a difficult journey to learn how to navigate that little voice in my head, the way I speak to myself. And someone told me this, and it really got me thinking, that if you catch yourself talking to yourself, just listen how you speak to yourself. And if you were saying the same things that you are telling yourself to a friend, you would be ashamed of how you are speaking to yourself. So is there any practice or strategy or something that you apply in order to catch yourself in those moments? Because that could be like a very important, like, foundational moment in order to develop that kind of awareness that you were referring to earlier.
I realized years after that I have the same problem. Like, I was talking really bad about myself. And up until recently, I also realized something else, that my love to myself was conditional. You know, I had the capacity to give unconditional love to others, but my love to myself was conditional. If I wasn't productive enough, if I wasn't performing well, I was talking shit about me. I was feeling bad about myself. I had zero compassion. Ill, low energy, tired, no excuses. Like, nah, you can do it. And sometimes you can feel like that. It's the same voice that can motivate you to a certain level, like, because you believe so much in your strength that no matter what, even if you don't feel like it, you can do it. You have to be so disciplined and do it. And yes, discipline goes as far as it does, because after that, it's not discipline anymore, it's negative self-talk. When you can't show compassion to you, that's not discipline anymore. And especially in our standards and the trends that we have now, that only talk about the discipline and hustle society, you neglect a big part of it. Yes, even if you hustle and you achieve your goals, if you in the process have lost yourself or lost the compassion towards yourself just because you have to be more disciplined or you have to be more like a robot, you're losing the big battle. You might win the small ones, but you're losing a big one with yourself. Because it will come to you at some point. It will knock at your door. And if it doesn't affect you directly, it might affect your relationships. So as a person who for years I had a lot of negative self-talk, a lot of self-sabotaging behaviors. Not that I don't now. I still keep cutting myself having them. My take on that is I named those voices. I named them ego, my ego self. Because for years I had issues with my ego self. And no matter what some people try, and I tried it too, I'm not going to blame anyone for that, people try to suppress the ego self, you can never beat that beast. You can never win the ego self. You can always learn to deal and listen to it in a better way. You can't completely reason with it. You can only learn how to deal with it. Well, what is there? What to deal with this part of you. Identify. And it's a long process. You ask me if I have a tip to that. It's not a tip. Like, I can give 10 tips, but it's going to take really long time. Like, you need to be so patient. You need to develop really deep level of awareness. Journaling is one of the tips. Like, journal, write them down, listen to your voices, and practice like what is now called mindfulness. But I would say more of like observing listening to these voices, name them, literally give them names. And when they speak to you, think as if someone is speaking to you. Like, visualize conversations with you when this is happening and try to see where voice is coming from. Not always these bad voices are coming from a place of distraction, because that's one of the biggest misconceptions probably. Like, people think that they have all these negative voices because they want to harm them. They don't want to harm you. Every voice has one goal. Some of them have to protect you, which usually is protection. Fear is a voice of protection as well. Anxiety is a voice of protection. All these things that you don't have the capacity to do yet, and you have all this down talk, is coming from a good place inside of you. It's coming from a good inner child inside of you trying to communicate with you. But sometimes it's not relevant to the present. So that's why for me it's important to give them names and realize why I have the fear right now. I have the fear because I'm afraid that if I do this step and I fail, I will feel bad about myself. So I'd rather not to do it at all because I don't want to feel bad about myself because I failed. And this shows lack of compassion and lack of understanding. Because if a friend of you come to you and say, like, I want to try this next move on my business or try to approach this person or whatever it is, the situation, what would you say to them? Yeah, of course, do it. Would you ever discourage someone to do that? Most likely no. But when it comes to yourself, you have such a much of protective mechanisms that we're going to block you because you don't want to get hurt, or you don't want to fail, or you don't want to feel this really sad, deep emotions. So you prefer to avoid, escape, leave this friendship because if I get too close, I might get hurt. Leave this business idea because if it fails, I don't know how to handle it. And it doesn't happen consciously, it happens subconsciously all the time. The only way to deal with them is to observe your patterns and be very brutally honest with yourself. Yes, I do that.
It's a self-protecting mechanism that's happening there. That's why I found the workshop super fascinating that we had last week about the subconscious mind, is because whether we like it or not, we are all fucked up in a way. Because literally we have been programmed by our experiences. Your brain is a sponge. It just absorbs everything from the moment you're born until the age of 7, right? Because your brain wavelength and everything is changing. So before that, you're literally programmed in order to survive this world. And many of those learnings are not serving you anymore as an adult.
Yeah.
But they are there, and you don't even know that they are there. And they are impacting every single moment of your life. And whether it comes to business or money or relationships or friendships or just to yourself as well. So that's why it's very important to do the work and break down those kind of behavioral patterns that are not serving you anymore. And that's why I think it's very important that people spend some time with themselves. And that's something that we don't do nowadays.
Yeah.
Because there's always something just to numb our feelings, just to distract ourselves, to not face the problems that we have in our lives, because it's just easier to avoid them and to not deal with them, but the problem is not solved, and it's still going to be there, and it's still going to be growing inside of you, and it's going to impact the rest of your life.
Yeah. It's, as you said, it's easy. That's why most people choose this path. But it's not going to serve you, because you're going to face the same problem in a different situation. The more you avoid, the more you try and escape from that, the more you don't identify the core beliefs and the core wounds that are there that hold you back, the problem always going to have just different faces. Either it's going to be in your relationships, like a lot of people feel, they say they want a successful relationship, they say they want a good partner, but then they have all these deep wounds of not feeling capable of love, or unlovable for themselves. Because if you don't give love to yourself, if you don't show compassion to yourself, if you don't show empathy to yourself, no wonder why you can't show it to other people, but you can't accept this from other people. So this is going to affect your pretty much all the relationships in your life if you haven't identified what is that makes you keep repeating the same pattern. Same as in your business. Like a lot of people say they want money, or they want to succeed, or they want to have a good career, but if deep down you feel like unlovable, unworthy, not good enough, you're going to find ways to sabotage yourself. Your mind is going to find ways to show you what you truly believe.
And if you tell those kind of things to yourself, you are going to find a way to prove it to yourself that
you
you
need
are
to
right.
prove it. Exactly.
If you tell yourself that you are a loser, yes.
If
you are going to prove it to
always,
yourself that you are right.
Yeah.
You are right, you are a loser.
If your core belief is I'm always going to fuck up at the end, you're always going to fuck up at the end.
Exactly. So that's why it's also very important to practice this self-talk. It's almost like a self-hypnosis, that the things that you say out loud, the things that you have conversations in your own head, those are the things that are actually going to manifest and going to become true.
Yes, but also identify where are these coming from? What make you feel unworthy in the past? Why you having, challenge yourself, ask those challenging questions of why do I keep self-sabotaging myself? Because deep down I don't feel like I deserve this. Why?
When it comes to hypnotherapy, it has actually been shown that it has a significant success rate in smoking, anxiety relief, chronic pain management. Success rate can range from 60 to 90% depending on the condition.
Yes.
When it comes to your work, what are the most typical issues or challenges that people visit you with?
To be honest, it's toxic relationship. Moving on, break up. Because, it's always our partner will trigger us. It's a mirror. So people, because it's so painful when you have a heartbreak, it's so painful to move on. It feels like it's there forever. And then once you feel that experience over and over again, it's either you think that you're numbing yourself and you don't want to fall in love again, or it's either you go through the process of it very, very deep. Because most of us, we attract partner that's familiar for us, not what's right for us. Familiar in a way that if you come to think of it, like if you have a partner, it's like, does she look like my mom? Does she act like my mom? Or does she treat me like my mom or my dad? So because the subconscious mind copies from 0 to 7. So what we see on the relationship with our mom and dad, that makes it familiar for us and that makes normal for us. So let's just say, for example, my client always get attracted with people who violently, physically abuse her. And as I wonder where it comes from. And then when she was 3-year-old, she saw her dad beating her mom. But they were in the carnival. They were in the public. And then the dad says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I just get jealous." Because the dad has anger issues. And the dad slapped her mom in front of her. And she was so scared, "Oh, what's going on?" And then the dad says, "Sorry." It's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just jealous. I just love you so much. And I don't want to lose you. I want to. And I asked the 3-year-old, what was the belief of the 3-year-old? She was like, oh, it's okay to be physically abused as long as the guy will say sorry. I feel loved. And she anchored that belief.
So that's what she was familiar with, and
Yes.
that's what drives her choices when it comes to choosing a partner.
Yes.
That's pretty insane. Okay, do you have any other examples?
Another example is weight loss. So weight loss also, like, she saw her dad again beating her mom, and then she was 5 year old and she was holding her mom's hand, and I was like, I wonder what was the belief of the 5 year old. It doesn't make sense, right? Weight loss, and you have this, you have this. She was like, it doesn't make sense. Why I am in this situation? Like, I saw my dad beating my mom. I was holding my mom's hand, and I asked her what was the belief of the 5 year old, and she was like, I want to be big in order to protect my mom. I wanted to be big in order for me to protect my loved ones. So it means starting from 5 year old, she gained weight because she wanted to be big. But when you're a child, you don't have logical reasons. You don't know what's fat. You don't know what's healthy. You don't know what's big. You don't know what's strong. Big is big.
Yeah, you just want to be bigger because
Just
it
wanna
feels
be
like
bigger.
bigger is safer. When you're small, it feels like more, like
Yes.
the puppy thing.
Yeah, and it also just reminds me to one of my friends. He is the person who has been religiously working out, eating well, sleeping well, doing all the right things that's in the book.
Yes.
When I look at him, he has not changed
At
a
all.
bit since I know him. And it's been a decade.
See?
So are you saying that it's all because he has this subconscious programming that he should not grow, he should not get bigger?
Yes.
That could be a reason.
It could be a reason. You never know. Subconscious minds have lots of amazing stories that you'd be so surprised. You never know, like, oh, for you it's like, this doesn't make sense. But
How
for the
does it
child,
work?
it makes sense.
How does it work with like the more mental or emotional?
I'm sorry?
How does it work with like more mental or emotional abuse situations? Because like the physical, you can easily spot it. Like it was probably goes back to beating as that. But how you dive deep when it comes to emotional abuse, and why do you stay on that or not? Like,
Hmm. So with the emotional abuse, you normally get it from your parents as well. Let's just say your dad is always insulting your mom, and that's humiliation or disrespect. And then you copy it and you make it as normal. Like when your dad is always insulting your mom and your mom just accepting it without expressing her anger, without protecting herself. So it's either you become like your dad or it's either you become like your mom. So when someone is insulting you, just freeze because no one teaches you how to speak up. No one teaches you how to protect yourself. And that's where you're getting used to the disrespect and humiliation. Or it's either when people disrespect you, you get so angry that you couldn't hold your emotions because you wanted to speak up for your mom, maybe. And when you're a child, you have this, I'm going to protect you, mom. I'm going to protect you, mom. So that's also part of it. Even if you were not able, even if you were not physically abused, but the emotional abuse as well that you got from your mom and dad. Also, this is an example of like my client, she just got engaged. Actually, she just got married 2 weeks ago. And she was so scared to be in a relationship because she was so scared to be betrayed or cheated. And most of her relationship, it happens all the time. And then when we go back, she was 6 year old, and then her dad cheated on her mom. And I was like, what was the belief of this 6 year old? And she was like, I saw my mom suffering. I saw how my mom was crying. I saw how the cheating take out the life of my mom. And I don't want that to happen to me. And the more she have that fear, the more it's going to happen. Because fear is a very strong energy. And you can feel it in every one of us.
and then you attract it probably.
Attracted. So the more you're scared, the more you have fear, the more it's going to happen.
So interesting. How you actually attract the familiarity.
Yes.
So this client was keep rejecting or have the fear of getting into relationships because when she saw that in her past and all that suffering, then she was afraid that if I go into a relationship and I got cheated, I will suffer the same.
Yes. So it didn't happen to her, but it happened to her mom, and she saw her mom suffering. So that's why, no, I'm not gonna have a relationship. I don't wanna feel that suffering with my mom. I don't wanna have that.
Would you have an example for someone who has an unhealthy relationship with work? That they are workaholics, they work all the time, they never allow themselves to rest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's also a thing because like pain, you can get different pain on different versions of life. So let's just say, am I not pleasing my relationship, but I'm pleasing my boss through work? So because you get the same drugs of pain. So that's why there's a lot of distraction that's going on, and yeah, you can have that unhealthy relationship with work because maybe your boss is rejecting you all the time. Maybe your boss is doing this to you, and it's not just only one part of life.
So are you saying that some people are intentionally or unintentionally
And
seeking for that rejection?
Yes.
And that's a good question. Like, why do we, as people, like that gap between the seeking for the rejection or like liking this, where there is a gap between you and your boss and or you and your partner? Like, why that makes it more appealing than a healthy relationship with your boss, friends, or partner, or whatever?
Mm-hmm. Because we always wanting to feel the drugs, and because subconscious mind is not logical at all, it's very illogical. It will go find ways that can what do you call that can produce that pain. So whether it's work, whether it's sports, friends, and we always keep on thinking like, why keep on attracting toxic relationship, toxic friends, toxic work, toxic bosses. So the gap between there, it's just only the drugs, I guess. It's the feeling of that same sensation all over and over again. And change is scary. Like change is scary, and it's being repeating. It's repetitive patterns. And that's why most people who are been in addiction is like, yeah, I just got off from rehab for drugs. But actually they're addicted with women as well. They're addicted with cigarettes.
Yeah, they
And
change one addiction to the other, like
Yes.
drug to sex or to cigarettes
Yes.
or work can be also.
Yes,
Yeah.
work also, because it's not about the addiction. It's about the feeling. Like, what are you craving? What are you trying to fulfill? What are you trying to
This
distract?
dopamine
What kind
boost.
of pain?
Yeah.
It just reminded me to a study I heard about a year ago. I think it was called confirmation bias. So they did this experiment where they asked people who they want to live with, choosing the people from their friend group. And then after that, they also asked the friends and the people like how they think of that person. And what came back is that the people whose opinion of me were more aligned with my opinion of myself are more likely to choose those people. So let's say that if I have a belief about myself that I'm not worthy or I'm not funny or I'm XYZ, people tend to choose the people who also think the same thing about me.
Yeah,
Confirm your belief.
because it's
Exactly.
familiar.
That's
Yes.
what's familiar.
That's what's familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why sometimes, let's just say, my dad used to beat me when I was young. Let's just say that. And then after that, oh, I have a good relationship with my dad now. But how about your current relationship? How is your partner treating you?
Yeah.
Because I can get the drugs to a different person.
And that also can be self-sabotaging, kind of.
Yeah.
Like if you had like a bad relationship and then you end up being in a good one, that your partner is treating you well, that
Yeah.
can be reasons to run away.
And it's because it's boring. There's
It's
no
boring.
pain.
There's no pain there.
There's no pain. There's no certain drugs.
So if your partner and you're not like healed from this trauma, that's not inflicting you some pain, and it's just
You run away.
wow.
Or you look for a replacement.
You look for a replacement.
So like we had 150 people sign up for a self-love challenge, which means a lot of people feel they don't love themselves enough, right? So that also gives you a perspective that it's not something you should feel ashamed of. And it's okay that it takes practice to be more compassionate with yourself, because you may kind of love yourself,
Feeling
but love
ashamed
yourself
of-
in conditions.
Feeling ashamed of meaning that you realize that you don't love yourself.
Yeah, that's fine to admit that and then learn to re-love yourself. Because you may love yourself, but you love yourself that was in my case. I was loving myself with conditions. It was a conditional love. And the biggest lesson I've learned is to go on a journey to love yourself unconditionally. Doesn't mean that not have expectations, or not expectations, but don't have like ambitions and like don't have goals with yourself.
Standards.
And standards. Yeah, having standards for me is a sign of self-love as well, right?
Absolutely.
So it doesn't mean that just because you love yourself unconditionally, you don't have standards. But it means like you don't tie your self-worth with your productivity. You don't tie your self-worth with your mistakes. You lose all those ties. You love yourself for who you are. And it's okay to have a standard of like, oh, fuck, I'm overweight. I need to lose weight. I need to be disciplined and be strict with myself to do that. That doesn't mean you don't love yourself. You can love yourself and do this at the same time.
Yeah.
The unconditional love doesn't mean I accept the body positivity shit, that I accept myself as it is and I don't do anything. No. Because you love yourself and because you have some standards
That's
now.
why you do the work.
That's why you do the work. That's why you're trying to change the shit that they don't serve you. But don't tie this with
Your self-worth.
Yeah. Like just because I had a bad month on my business doesn't mean I'm shit or I'm a failure and I don't love me anymore.
You know, I'm guilty in that myself as well.
Yeah.
Because I know where it's coming from and it's work in progress. But I feel more worthy when I have more utility. Meaning that I'm more productive, I produce more, I'm being helpful, I'm being useful, right? So that's like a subconscious programming again, what I have. And I had this conversation with Atlas. And what he told me, my mind just couldn't accept it. Like, I know I was just rejecting what he was telling me.
Straight no.
And I told him, what he told me, or he asked me, like, do you feel that you are worthy and you are worthy of love even if you don't do anything at all, nothing at all? You just sit and breathe. And I'm like, for how long? And like, forever. I'm like, no, like,
Yeah.
I can't. Like, I cannot say that I am worthy or I'm worthy of love, because that's just how I am. That's how I'm programmed. But I think there's a path that how you can get closer to that state, that you still love yourself and you still feel that you are worthy of love and everything that's in your life just by being you.
Yeah. That's actually
Hard for me,
real
even
hard.
just me saying it, my brain just like, just rejects this idea.
Yeah.
I have one last one.
Go for it. Give the closing one.
So I learned this from Janina, and it's about fear-based assumptions versus love-based assumptions. So in our lives, our relationships are the ones that takes the most space and energy in our heart, in our brain, in our entire being. And let's say when you message someone and that person doesn't get back to you, but you see that they are active on Instagram and they are doing other stuff as well, you may think, oh, like, he's not too busy to post a story, but he's too busy to answer my fucking message, right? And then you immediately go on the fear-based assumption that this person doesn't appreciate me, this person doesn't love me, this person doesn't respect me, and so on. But what if you reframe this thing? That it's not that he's not responding to you because he doesn't care.
it's just because there's just so much on his plate, or he's distracted by something else, or like he had to do X, Y, Z. And then
Or
you
can just
just
forgot about
reframe
it.
it as like a love-based assumption. And then it just made my life 10 times more peaceful.
Yeah. That's
Because
part of letting go of the ego thing. That process. Because the ego is
a
what gives
part
the
of
part
it.
of. Because if you see this perception, like exactly this example that you say, the negative side of it is based completely on ego. The other side is based completely on like love and empathy. Because you take it personally because you're going into the ego mode perspective in life, that everything is happening to me, that he is ignoring me, that this person is doing this to me. But when you see it from from the flip side of the coin, as you said, then you let go of this ego. So your ego is just, you silent your ego voice, and you see it as like, oh, maybe this person is too busy, is too distracted, is dealing with something, his mind is all over, or he's too busy with life and things. So you go into the empathy perspective. You're trying to understand.
Yeah.
And to do that, you need to let go of the ego. So the other side is completely ego.
So that's the love-based assumption.
Yeah.
I think ego is just a part of it, because my inner child doesn't have an ego. My inner child has fears that this person has chosen not to respond to me, or this person has chosen like not to show up at my party, or this person X, Y, Z. It's the fear that comes up from your inner child, as that you are afraid of abandonment.
Yeah.
Or you're afraid of like humiliation, or when somebody said something to you and it was a joke in public, you took it too personal.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, like this person is humiliating me. But it was just a joke. There was like no bad intention behind it, right? So I think whenever I face this kind of situations, when my mind just starts wandering and my mind starts freaking out about something, I'm like, quiet. Just quiet for a second. How can I reframe this situation based on fear-based assumptions or based on love-based assumption? Why am I acting the way I'm acting? Am I afraid of something? Yeah, maybe. Okay. Why don't I just give him the benefit of the doubt, right? And then after that, life goes on. Your life is better. Your day is better. You stress less. And then I'm telling you, like 99.9% of the time, you were completely wrong when you assumed based on like out of fear.
Yeah, I would say it's what you described on the humiliation of the fear and everything is close related to ego. Like even some of the fears are still like affected by our ego side, because ego, it doesn't always has to do the aggressive side of the ego. Sometimes it's to do with our oh poor me side of the ego. Like that's part of our ego as well. It's another phase. And shout out to one of my favorite books that is like ego is always the enemy. Ego is the enemy, because it is like a lot of these voices, they're just coming off making ourselves the center of everything. Yeah. That's why I say like that's also like part of the ego if you see it in a different way, because we might see it as a like of oh fuck, there's a fear of being abandoned or fear of doing this, but at the end of the day it's our ego talk that talks these things to us of like oh yeah, this thing is humiliating you, it's trying to do this to you.
We are living through a loneliness epidemic.
100%.
We are more isolated than ever before. What do you think your men's circle, the warrior movement, give to men that they may be lacking?
A place to belong and remember who they are.
And how do you do that?
When you ask me how am I doing that, what are you exactly talking about?
How do you get men to remember who they are?
Stripping away all the noise and let them sit with themselves. And when I talk about sit with themselves, it's not just about literally sitting with themselves, but maybe the better words are letting them face themselves. Face to face, like raw, real, and honest.
Why do you think that's important?
Because each one of us already has everything that we're looking for. It's just that we're looking for it at the wrong place. And the reason I believe this is important is because that's where I believe we really get to know ourselves, and where we find true confidence in who we are and not what we do.
You know, it resonates with me so much is because that's exactly what I got out of the circle as well. So I started to hear my voice more than ever before. And I think before I started attending these gatherings, I felt that my thoughts were not even my thoughts. They were coming from somewhere. It's almost like I was programmed to think that way. And as you said it, when we are able to strip that away, you really get to know the true you, the raw you. And throughout a series of different activities that we also do on those gatherings.
Yeah.
Sometimes we sit with ourselves and sometimes we challenge each other, meeting an edge,
Yeah.
right?
And edges can, I think it's so interesting because every time I talk about edges, I think a man's mind immediately goes to, oh, I'm pushing myself in the gym. I'm pushing myself for a run.
That's how I thought about it the first time when you said that.
Yeah. That's where we immediately go, because that's also where I believe that society, created a certain picture around meeting our edges. And yet, sometimes the deepest edge that you can actually meet, I believe, is being silent, not doing anything at all,
That's an edge for some.
being with your feelings, being present with the sensations that you feel, allowing the challenge that you experience inside take up space and hold that. Be present with yourself, not trying to run away, not trying to distract, not trying to escape. Be with it. Turn around and face yourself. And facing yourself has so many different layers, so many different forms, shapes, and ways. But that's where I think true self-mastery comes into place, because if you can meet yourself moment to moment, you attune yourself to what it is that you need in each moment of your life.
What do you think that most people get wrong about these gatherings, a men's circle?
That's a good question. Well, I think what immediately comes to me is that some people have no idea what it means to be a man. Some people have no idea, and I think I'm specifically talking about women, because they are not a man, so they don't know how much weight we carry, how much we try to be there, show up, give. And I think from that place, it's very easy to judge something from that place from that limited perspective. I think it's really easy to judge that, because we as men are human too. And society portrayed us or conditioned us to, I think, demonize and disconnect from ourselves and to just live in our heads. And I think the moment we actually reconnect with our humanness, we realize that we all need a place to belong. that we all need a way to get in touch with ourselves and to actually be seen, witnessed, supported, and challenged by other men in this case. I'm not sure if this answers your question, but that just came up for me. And to be truly honest, I don't even care if people get it wrong, because I don't care about those people, because most of the people, like you shared, they just listen to something from afar, which they might not even fully grasp because they're not even part of the conversation. And from that place, they make that judgment. And no matter what I will tell that person, it doesn't matter because they already made their opinion. So I don't even bother. I don't even try to find what those people get wrong. I think what I try to say with that, and maybe that makes even so much more sense, is what I want them to get right about it is that we as men, we need a place to belong. And unfortunately, our society doesn't provide that. Because what happens is when you separate men from each other, they start to embrace this lone wolf mentality, which I've done for a really long time. But what happens through that is that you just sit with your own shit over and over and over again. And we need places where we can drop that weight and let that weight be held by other men, just if it's just for 5 fucking minutes. That we can just remember our strength, remember who we are, remember what we're capable of, and see ourselves sometimes through the eyes of another man. We need that. We're not fucking Superman. It's like, we are human too. And I think that's sometimes what's easily forgotten about. Yeah.
It goes back to what we just touched on earlier, that it's important to have openness towards a different perspective.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think some people or many people just simply don't have because they are lacking understanding. And that was also my intention with sitting down with you.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to this kind of discussions, somehow feminine and masculine always come up as the main topic. So what does masculinity mean to you, and how is that present in our day-to-day life, in your opinion?
That's a very good question. What does masculinity mean for me? Masculinity for me means... So here's the thing. There are 2 different ways I would answer this question. The first way would be, masculinity for me is presence. It's this deep presence, that unshakable presence, this space. Like I always explain to you guys, it's the riverbank that holds the river.
I love that.
And the river is the feminine. It's life, it's energy, it's everything that is changing. And I think masculinity for me means to be able to live in the present moment. And I don't even want to say that this is masculinity. I think this is just the way I try to live my life, and it includes both. And this is like, it's so hard to separate those two because they go hand in hand, And I think the moment when you deepen your presence, you are actually able to receive life in a whole new way. And in this case, what I try to do on a Saturday gathering with you guys is that you do not just cultivate and expand your riverbank and deepen that presence, but also at the same time learn to sit with the waters, the crashing waves sometimes that are pushing you to your edges, like to be able to sit with that. Because what comes through that, and maybe that answers your question about what masculinity means for me. But what happens through that is that we are able to live in harmony with ourselves. And if we live in harmony with ourselves, we live in harmony with our community. We live in harmony with our friends, with our partner. We live in harmony with the world. And I think what masculinity means for me means being able to cultivate that harmony for yourself. Take this responsibility and carry it out there as a leader, as a man who provides that. A safe space, because what that does, and this is just my own personal experience from the work I've invested into myself, and I've shared this with you guys too, you become a safe harbor. And maybe that's what masculinity means for me. You're a safe harbor for whatever comes your way to arrive. And it can be you, your own emotions, your own feelings, sensations, perspectives, whatever it is. But it can also be your partners, your friends, brothers, sisters, family, random people, the world. You're able to hold that. And you're able to be the safe harbor who welcomes it all. That's the thing. Who welcomes it all. Because you realize that your ability to be present with that is what makes you alive. That's what aliveness is. And we as men, we sometimes tend to go to extremes, right? Oh, I push myself and I run 5,000 kilometers, which is cool. Hey, man, I pull my hat in for every man like who's really pushing their limits. And we all have our way. And what I recognize for myself doing that many times, like big time, running from Uluwatu to Canggu and doing all kinds of shit, there was always like an attempt of getting in touch with life, feeling alive. Fuck, man, in this space right now, I feel alive. And I think what I try, or the intention behind what I'm doing, the service that I'm providing, is to just help man that being alive is not out there. Being alive is right here inside of you. And if you can cultivate such a deep presence that you can pick up on the fine nuances, the different movements, the different waves, the currents of your own inner aliveness, of what is present inside of you, man, you will be in more service to the world than you can ever imagine.
Thank you for tuning into this episode. If you ever feel the calling to connect with professionals who can help you in your healing and self-development journey, just hit the link in the description. And also, if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button. That's the best way you can support the show. And it also makes me happy. So thank you.